why I believe that you are not what you think you are, but what you think you are. So I thought I'd share that with you guys. And so the question is, how are the dominating thoughts of your mind affecting your attitude? So that is so appropriate for what we deal with every single day, right? Whether it be with clients, whether it be with our staff, just running your business in general, things that come at you. It's okay. How am I going to interpret this? Is it an opportunity, or does it really suck? And this is crappy that this happened to me today. That could be the truth, but it all is then how do you find the solution to it? So, all right. Who listened to the podcast and has any thoughts? I literally have a whole, all these thoughts on the podcast. And also there was a worksheet that goes along with it. And here's how I want to do this. Let's take some talking points. Let's take some things that stood out to any of you. I would love for you to share it. And then if we still have time, like if we're not at the end of our time, then I will get to some of these discussion questions. And they might be repetitive. We might have already covered that. But Cora, I saw that you had your hand up.
Oh, yeah, no, I listened to the podcast and I'm familiar with Simon Sinek, especially with his book, Begin with Your Why. And so taking that approach to pretty much everything that I've done in this career and the career before. And if I took it with a service approach, I feel like you get a lot more reception. And honestly, it's fulfilling too, think about it. Because you feel sad about what you're accomplishing.
Yeah. I think my thought on that service piece is, as I'm listening to it, and some of the points where he got in the podcast where he was talking about, having that heart for people and having that, and I imagine like all of us, and I do it in joint work as well, having those life insurance conversations, right? Where in the back of your mind as this agency owners, you might be thinking, okay, I hope I find success in this one because I got to move to that next column, on the grid, and this is really going to help me and help my rolling 12 and all of that. And it's human nature, right? As business owners to think about the first piece of that, but also think about your approach when you're thinking about the numbers versus thinking of your approach. If you were to view that human being, as Simon Sinek would say, sitting across the desk from you as a human being, and think about how you're going to impact their life, how you're going to change. All of you have changed people's lives because you have been able to secure them with a life insurance plan and the policies that fit into that plan. Every single one of you. So it's just a different frame of mind, right? Who else has some thoughts that they wanted to bring up in regards to the podcast? What'd you like best?
I really like Simon Sinek. I've read all of his books, have all of his books. I like his style. I also think I have some similarities and then I have some disagreements with him. And well, not even necessarily disagreements, but in the same way that service first, because I totally believe in that. But at a certain point, you spend way too much time on service and not enough time on growing your business. And, as I'm reanalyzing the way that I do things, I'm realizing there are 10% of my customers take up 80% of my time, right? Because they want to just talk all day. And I would love to just talk all day with them. So I've got things to do. So I think Simon Sinek has a really great point of view in how things could be, should be, if everything were ideal. Very similar to, if everybody followed, let's say, the 10 Commandments, right? Or just love thy neighbor. If everybody did love thy neighbor as thyself, everything would be perfect. If every business always put service above everything, then everything would be wonderful. But I think in ultimate practicum, there has to be a balance with the reality of So in some aspects, I kind of disagree with Simon in those things because he's very he's an optimist for sure. He has a book about that too. Super optimistic. So there's that piece that I kind of disagree with, but something I really love that he does that I do too is reframe conflict as curiosity. So anytime there's something that I don't understand, it becomes questions, and I'm like, my wife hates this because I ask really uncomfortable questions to whatever people in the wrong situations, whether it's a different political ideology or something. I have no problem just to ask them, and she's worried I'm going to offend somebody. And I just want to know, why do you think this way? Help me understand where you're coming from, and then I'll just keep asking questions, even if I still disagree. At least then I kind of understand or can find some common ground or maybe understand you and why you feel that way. So I thought it was interesting that Simon Sinek brought that up. So that was probably.
Who else thought that was really stood out to them on instead of putting judgments? We all do that, right? Judge people every single day. Everybody we come across, there's some sort of what we would call, even if it's not apparent to you, there is some sort of judgment of that person. So replacing that with curiosity and asking questions, just what Zach was saying. What did that stand out to anyone else? They want to comment? What stood out to me, I agree with you, Zach. I know that a lot of you have not met my husband. So we are coming up on 34 years of marriage, so not quite as long as Tom, but so he's been around a while, right? And there is probably no other person in my life that I have learned more of how to have a conversation with people than learning from how my husband does it. Like, he is, from day one, he is so, people love him because he asks all sorts of questions about them. And he doesn't do it, it may be purposeful, but that's just who he is. And he's just so curious about what makes people tick. And so when I listen to this, I'm like, yeah, that's definitely Jim, my husband. So it's fascinating how he holds conversations with people. But that's what makes people feel good, right? Is asking them about themselves. All right, let me look at my none of y'all are talking. Who else besides Zach has some things that stood out to them? And Cora.
I'll say something here. I thought that I didn't know the guy, the speaker, never. I'm not really I don't read a lot of this type of stuff or listen to it really. So it was nice. It was refreshing. I liked what he talked about, and I don't know that I agree with him that it should be in every situation, but I like how he talked about going into situations where you're meeting people being underprepared and being able to speak from the heart and not having canned responses. I don't remember. I heard someone speak 25 years ago, 22 years ago, and they said, I've never learned anything by talking. And I think that that's something that we can take whether we're dealing with employees or clients or just people in our lives. When you meet someone, when you're getting to know someone, when you're building a relationship with someone, let them talk and do the majority of it. You'll learn a ton. You'll put them at ease. People appreciate talking about themselves. It's just part of human nature, and I think that that's an important thing for leaders, or people in business, or even just friendships and relationships. So, and I kind of took that part where he talked about going into situations underprepared, not unprepared, but underprepared.
Yeah.
And letting them steer the conversation. And I thought that was nice. I like that.
Oh, that's very good. And good facilitators of meetings have learned that skill, right? Of being able to have the confidence. And I think Craig Rochelle in the podcast said, "Oh, that can be scary, not being prepared." You can find yourself in a unique position of, oh gosh, what do I say now? That type of thing. But I think that really correlates to just us in meetings, right? Imagine yourself with a client that you haven't met with for a while. And sometimes you have to be careful because sometimes we have such an agenda because we've got, hey, this, got to do this in, only got an hour. And we have an agenda that we want to get to because we have a goal to finish and make sure we collect all the right information and all of that, where you might just make a bigger impact with this client and they might be open up to you more and trust you more if you did have some curious questions for them. I know that when I was mentioned, just, through working with all of you, there's many times where I have felt, and I'm a very detailed person, so I tend to go on that side where it's like, hey, let's get this done, rather than let me be curious about this person and find out about them. All right. One of the other things that, I don't know about you, if you were listening to this, there was he talked a lot about companies, right? And the correlation of high up executives and ethics, or following the law, or following ethics. Who has some thoughts about that piece of podcast? Like, how did that make you guys feel? Like, were you correlating that to our company at all? Or, my mind kind of, I'll be honest, my mind kind of went there too. Okay, once again, this is not me talking the whole time.
Yeah, I correlate a lot with, I came from the corporate world and with O'Reilly's and a couple of places. They always put the profit first. They kept cutting by power. They kept doing that. So I correlate a lot of that. I dealt with that for many, many years and in that career. And that's part of the reason why I got out of it, because I got tired of them putting corporate first, their agenda first, what was best. And, where they talk about leaders eat last, that wasn't the way it worked there. It was always what was best with them.
Yeah. So Matt, how did that make you feel as an employee?
Walked on, abused, and just a number.
Yeah. It was interesting to me how he said, like, back in the 80s, like the layoffs were never a thing, right? And I don't know about you. I mean, I'm on the older end of that, and I was like, I don't ever remember a work environment that wasn't profit driven. And he mentioned Jack Welch from GE and talking about, and it's funny he said that because my husband used to work for GE, and we definitely had those conversations where it was all about profit and not the people. And that's how my husband felt at that company. And also walking that gray area of law, like following, he mentioned the food industry and the diets, like that's a big thing now, right? With RFK in charge of that whole area and really peeling back. Why is it that, Eric Jansen has talked about going over to Europe, and his two girls, and they're they react differently to the food in Europe versus the food here. And the minute they get on an airplane and come back to the United States and start, eating the food that's served to them, they have stomach issues. Versus in Europe, they can eat whatever they wanted, and never ever did it affect them at all. So it's that whole thing. So why is it that the same company produces a product differently in the United States versus in Europe? And it's the point being, why are we driven by what's best for people versus what's best for profit? And I get it, it's a balance, right? We won't have a company if we don't bring in profit. So what are some of your thoughts on that? Right, this is how this works. Not me talking the whole time.
I love my last job because I'm a very much volunteers, and it started out very, very focused, people centric. Honestly, just yesterday, I had two people reach out to me. One of them wasn't even how I visit once a week is a 90-year-old because I stopped with the snow. And then another one called to see if I could recover, because he has cancer, and I was one of the first people he thought. And that is probably also found out over there, so that's that person who I know, as before, I remember full names, I remember events in their lives, but they're of course, they're not bragging on myself, but that's just, that was who I was, but when it changed. I was a manager and I had to sit there and let every conversation was scrutinized, every conversation that my sales reps was having with their customers. If they were not targeted or selling something. Like, even if they were, on their channel and had a trainer and smartphone, you get a flip phone, so they couldn't afford their bills. So that's when I wasn't like, I left, because I wanted to be in a environment where we could be service oriented, and that's what we came here. I have such a privilege to be in the position that we are in, where I'm to know people, and I have to support them, and we can do money off of that. And so it was a privilege to be able to do it.
So one of the things that I took note on was him talking about the Greatest Generation, right, World War II, and the example of, if you looked at that today versus that generation, back then he mentioned that there were boys that were committing suicide because they could not and were not drafted to go and fight for the country. Versus if you fast forward to today, there might be boys that would do the same thing because they were drafted. Like, imagine a draft in our day, it would be chaos, right? I mean, that's the person that comes to my mind, is you would have people hiding and running away and all of those things. And I think that is just a reflection on our society, making it so about self and not about, the bigger picture, not about the greater good. And one of the things is I wrote down was strong desire to belong to something bigger than yourself. And I think that really, because he mentioned that when he was telling that story, it really correlates into, and this is what I want to do, is always correlate it into like your agency, into your leadership and your staff, or like I say, if you don't have staff yet, you will, so be prepared for that. But that's the chance that you all get to create, like what, including your associate agents and your assistants and all of those things into the bigger picture. And what are we all doing this for? And, if you don't know, I'm assuming you all know that this is making sure that they're coming along for the ride and they see the value and they're part of what you're creating. Will help you get there faster than it if you have not yet or don't create that environment for them. Tony.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think there's a tension there. I really appreciate what Zach said about not getting lost, talking to people even though we want to. We do, this office, we want to be a culture that's a center of ministry, which is a real churchy word, but we just mean it like people are talking to us, they're coming in, they're hurting, they're frustrated. They feel like the world's out to get them, and a lot of times they feel like the insurance company's out to get them. But there's a tension there because when I started, I've been here 14 years almost. When I started, I felt like country was super, super people oriented. And not that we're not still, but as a corporation, I feel like we've become a lot more bottom dollar driven as opposed to people driven. And I think in the field, in the agency, we just have to be careful to keep that mindset of how important people are, and not, we all know this, but not all of us go to the only thing that matters is dollars, the only thing that matters is PIF, but that people really matter and understand that benefits our businesses when we treat people that way.
I agree with you, Tony. I always say I don't disagree with you, but I agree with you. And I hope, like, my whole goal of, and I've been, this is my 4th month with you all. And I just feel so privileged to be able to do this and, you know, I drive to work in the morning and I'm like, gosh, I get to do this. Like this is, I actually get paid to do this. I absolutely love what I do. And I hope based on what Tony is talking about, I am not your typical, and you might see difference. I know across the company, I am not sales driven. I'm very competitive and I want to see you all succeed and all of that. But I care more about you as a person. I care more about you as a leader for your team. I care about you more as a business owner and helping you grow your business. And I hope that you're seeing that by the actions, not just the words that I speak. But that's like my passion is that. And I know I give you a lot of data. I know I give you a lot of numbers, but that's for you to use to analyze your business. It's shifting. Like it definitely is. I think from Tony, what you feel is if we look at our executive leadership, if we look at and all, you know, not being recorded, but if you look at it's the truth. Jim Jacobs, Rob McDade, they are both attorneys. They're attorneys. So everything's about the data. Everything's about, okay, what we want to make an impact on this business and take it to the next level. And the numbers are driving them to do so. And so it's my job out here, at least for our team, is to make sure that I protect you from that as much as possible, even though it's the reality, right? So that's always my goal is to make it about you and how we can help you grow. And yes, the numbers are part of that, but I don't want it to be the main thing, you know. I appreciate your thoughts, Tom. I mean, Tony, sorry. I'm looking at Tom. What else? What else kind of stood out to you guys? I wrote down here, feed your children before you feed yourself. You know, that whole part of the podcast when he's talking about executives and making the sacrifice in the short term for the greater good. You know, I kind of wish there was a lot more of that. I think it's shifted. It's definitely shifted in today's society. It's all about self-preservation.
Very good. I appreciate the leaders eat last portion, you know, the feed your kids before you feed yourself, feed your staff before you feed yourself, you know, those sorts of things. But in his book, Leaders Eat Last, he talks about the waiting in line to get a bagel. I don't know if you remember that story. You know, there's a certain amount of bagels, and there's just this like unspoken code that you just wait in line until you can pick your bagel. So if you're ninth in line, there's 9 maybe flavors of bagel that you didn't get to choose from. It's like, but there's no actual rule that says you can't just walk up between people, reach into the box without being able to see and grab a bagel out of there. So maybe it's a little bit random, but we choose to stand in line sometimes for no reason, just because it's this unspoken rule or this unspoken thing that we were taught as a kid that you have to wait in line to get whatever's left. So it was really just about being assertive, but that's kind of a contrast to the leaders eat last, right? Because that's like a peer level thing, and it was interesting because it was in his book. But you know, the feeding your kids first or whatever, or your people first, I see that pretty often. Like we'll do group barbecues and stuff like that in our community groups, and like all of us guys would stand around, watch all the women and kids get their food, and then we just like look at each other and we're all waiting for somebody to break the seal, you know, like when's the time for us to eat? So it's kind of funny.
So what comes to my mind, Zach, when you talk about like the unwritten rule, I don't know about any of you, but this completely comes to my mind because I grew up in Southern California. All right. So I learned to drive in Southern California where it was every man for itself, man. You get on the freeway and if you're not going 70 miles an hour, you're going to get mowed over. So I'm a very aggressive driver just innately because that's how I learned to be. But also those when you have 2 lanes that go down into one, and I'm like, look, this is, my husband and I both have different perspectives on this. My perspective is, and this may cause some of you to not respect me anymore, but I'm all about, hey, those 2 lanes go all the way to the end for a reason. If everyone just followed all the way to the end and then zippered, I call it zippering. My kids always make fun of me. I'm like, zipper people, zipper. You zipper in, we would all have a better flow, right? No, you honk that, you get, the finger, you get all of that because people decide to line up way back because they know it's coming. And I'm like, this lane is wide open. Why aren't you people in this lane? Because in California, that's how we do it, So, my husband and I have a different view on that, but that's what came to mind when we were talking about that. It's like the unwritten rule that you got to get in line, even though there's a whole nother wide lane, and it comes to a point at the point that it should. So why is anyone in that one? Anyone else have a thought on that? Does that bug anyone else? Would you honk at me
No, I'm
if I was doing that? But okay, I'm curious, Mike. What is your thought on that? Like, what is your thoughts? What makes you, hey, let me say this right. What is it? How did your thought pattern start to come to the conclusion that you have to get in line when there's an open lane?
First of all, joking about the losing respect.
No, I know.
But, so, again, kind of what Zach was saying earlier and what the guy in the podcast talked a little bit about was, there's a difference between rules and ethics. Ethics are a higher standard. I'm not saying that it's unethical to drive up in that open lane when everyone else is waiting, but I feel like there's a politeness or something, and if everyone is taking the stance that as a community, as a driving posture, we are going to wait in this line. Even if that means that there's 500 yards of open lane on my right, the person that zips past me and gets up there 500 yards in front of me and tries to be the one that goes up and cuts in line to pick his own bagel, I'll be informed of it. I'm not going to flip you the bird. I'm not going to honk. I'll do it. And maybe it's a politeness thing, or maybe that's just how I was raised. I came from the military into this job 25 years ago, and it was very structured and rigid, and maybe that's a part of it. But those type of things don't annoy me when I'm driving, and for no real good reason. It's not like that one car is going to appreciably change the time I'm going to get to wherever I'm going. But it's more like I feel the person in that lane feels I'm entitled to get wherever I'm going faster than you because I'm not conforming with what everyone else is. And maybe conforming, maybe that's not a good thing to conform with everybody. But I feel like there's kind of this unwritten rule on driving to work with everything else that's going 70 miles an hour so that it works together as a unit. And when someone says, watch the system, I'm just going to go do what I want up here because there's no written rule saying I have to get in line with everyone. That can cause issues. Maybe the person that you're waiting to get in front of is not paying as much attention as they should, and they think this person's not going to butt their way in here. They're going to wait until someone gets on the lane, but you kind of butt your way in. Now there's a collision of some sort, maybe minor, but I don't know. That's just my thought.
No, I know. It's what he starts out the podcast with. Hey, strong opinions, loosely held. So I see where you're coming from. I see that, how that might look. And I appreciate it. So I might get like that next time.
Mike, I would have to say, I think there's a time and place for everything, right? So I totally agree with you. If I'm on the freeway and there's a closed lane, for some reason, some road construction or something, and everybody has to merge and people get over early, totally makes sense. If it's a passing lane or 2 lanes just naturally flow into one, there's a sign that says, hey, eventually this ends. I think there's a time and place. Like, are you being a jerk about trying to squeeze into that tiny spot, or is there plenty of room for you to zipper in? I think all those things matter, because I'm the same way, Mike. The unwritten rule, like people cutting in line, man, nothing I hate more than waiting in line for anything ever. Like, I don't want to go to big amusement parks because I'm going to spend more time waiting in line than I am having fun. I'd rather go to, small town Oregon mountain resort or something where I don't have to wait in line for hours. So I think there's a time and place, but that same unwritten rule that we think about and we worry about being courteous, how many of those people are thinking about being courteous to you? And, where do you find the balance between being assertive and moving toward your goal or your direction or accomplishing a thing that you're after versus just being polite because it seems like the nice thing to do? Not necessarily the right thing, but the nice thing.
Let me answer that with this. I try not to base how I'm going to treat people or how I conduct myself with the way other people around me behave. So I'm not concerned with if other people are going to be polite, let me in. I'm just concerned with myself, being the best person I can and being the best part of the cog in this machine that I can be. I'm the kind of person that when there's someone waiting to come out on a side street, I stop in the middle of traffic and let them out. I'm also the kind of person that leaves 15 minutes early to get someplace so that I can not rush and be stressed out and worried about hitting red lights. And I try to be prepared in what I'm doing so that I'm not doing that. I know not everybody does that. I know I'm a minority in that. I drive 65 miles an hour because driving 72 in the short distances we're driving around here is a difference of 30 seconds or a minute. What does it matter? That little bit of time, that little bit of lost reaction time because I'm speeding means a deer or a dog runs out in front of me and I don't have as much time to react to it. There's no sense for me to speed. I just, that's how I am. I'm not saying everybody's got to be that way, but I don't try to change the way I'm going to be by what I want other people to do or what they're actually doing. So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
So Mike, what's your driver IQ score?
23.
That just came to mind when you said that. So I was like, oh, we don't just driver IQ percentages. It's awesome.
One of the
Mine's 15. Mine is 15.
So Christine, I grew up in California as well, and this is just more perspective of just listening to everybody is there's defensive driving in California. It's the culture. Everybody's in a rush. There's a million things going on. If we can relate this to what we were talking about earlier is culture and how in our offices we're in control of what our own individual corporations that we run through country of how we do things. And I think that talking about this, I think it's a lot to do with just culture. Here in Oregon, it's so much more relaxed than California. I always call it white knuckling driving when you get there, but that can be related to different cultures of how they run their businesses. It can be all these different things can be related back to our businesses. And I know that being here in Oregon, my culture has completely changed, where we're a lot more relaxed and so forth. And when I see California drivers, I get frustrated just because they do drive differently. But when we're again relating it back to our individual businesses, I think that is really what we're talking about of how we create that culture for the people that work for us, and how we can create our own individual culture. Even my office, I feel like is a house. I didn't listen to the podcast, so I kind of feel I didn't do my homework, but just from listening to what we're talking about, that's just my 2 cents.
So true. When you go back there, Rusty, I know I opened a can of worms, but when you go back to California, yes, it is. Even now, I feel like, oh my, this is like a raceway.
Yeah.
Heck.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I know, I want to address like one part of the podcast when he talks about, he gets into the relationship piece. And he starts talking about, and you can relate this to your staff, right? Of having those hard conversations, those difficult conversations. And he had an example of even just in friendship, right? So he's writing a new book on friendship. And it was so curious to me when he was talking about why he picked that subject. And it's because he said, gosh, you have tons of data and resources on how to have a better marriage, how to have be a better leader. I mean, all of those things. And because there's no books on how to be a better friend. And so, that just kind of follows his whole personality of kind of bucking the trends and bucking the system and, thinking outside the box on what's not out there. And so I'm curious to read that book, but he went into the relationship piece of, how many of us, and I guess there's going to be a handful, I'll just be transparent, a handful of, like, I don't like to be in strife with people at all. In fact, it really, really bothers me. And so my personality is to make sure that if I'm out of sync with a friend or even people in my family, any of you, any, of my previous team, that I'm like, all right, let's talk this out. Like, let's address this. What happened here? Let's work through this. I am so not afraid of difficult conversations, but I've learned that that's not something that, like in my earlier years, I completely avoided it, but I've learned how to kind of work through conflict. And I don't know about you, and how many times that you all have done that, but majority of the time it's complete miscommunication. They thought I said one thing one way and I didn't mean it that way, and all that. So how many of you, just even with your staff or your team, do you have an example of working through a difficult conversation or a difficult situation, and on the other side of it, how has that growth been? Have you feel like you've put yourself in a better and your agency in a better position because you had those difficult conversations? Example. Nobody?
Well, I guess, I don't know about having difficult conversations, but I can tell you how I avoid them. It's by having such open lines of communication that we can talk about difficult things kind of casually. Like, hey, this is just a part of how it is. Okay, are we good? Do we understand? And it doesn't have to be something that is prepared for or really thought about, generally speaking, just because of open communication. We just talk about everything. Honestly, that's like how it works in my marriage, is you just talk a lot about everything. If it's on your mind and you have a question that you don't understand, just ask, because chances are you misunderstood something. Or if we have to change direction, it's a conversation about why we need to change direction, and then what that means, or what that's going to require of us in order to do it, right? So we're going to start with why we need to do it, and then we're going to go to, what's that going to require of me? What's that going to require of you? What do you need from me to make sure you can do what's required of you? Those kinds of things. But that's casual conversation all the time. And then if it were, say, something like, someone came to work in just inappropriate clothing, because our communication is always so open, I can say something like, do you feel like that's a professional outfit? Do you feel like, were you running late this morning or something? You say something like that and it's, oh my gosh, baby threw up on me, or, I was, whatever happened. It's, okay, do you need a few minutes to go, get yourself together or whatever, something like that. But I feel like more often than not, we really avoid those difficult conversations by just having open communication 100% of the time.
I like the way you frame that, Zach, of, hey, this is how I avoid it. And I was thinking you were gonna say how you truly avoid it, like you don't have it, but you're like, no, I avoid it because we have such great open lines of communication. So that's a great point. Just kind of wrapping up here, you guys, one thing that I do want to finish with is Simon's concept of the infinite mindset. So, kind of in the worksheet. So there is lots of different worksheet, like Craig Rochelle always has these episode notes, but one of those, and I wrote it down in my notes too, is the infinite mindset reminds leaders that there is no finish line, right? We always think like, okay, when have we arrived? When is this? When are we going to be done with our work as leaders? And there really is no finish line. And so he's encouraging the commitment just to ongoing and continuous growth, and whatever that looks like. So I'm going to kind of finish this with encouraging that of, Mike, you mentioned that you haven't listened to Simon Sinek and I'm not sure about Craig Rochelle, but just in those, like putting yourself in a position of learning, of being curious, of just kind of, the input in your mind, it is that commitment to always being better. And I think that's what Simon really defines in this podcast is it's not being the best, it's being better than you were yesterday. So that's my encouragement to all of you today. It's really just, taking these different concepts that we talked about, and whether you agree or disagree with, zippering in or getting in line, 6 one way, half a dozen the other, I'll just put it that way. But it's really just that commitment to ongoing growth. And that's really the intent behind these monthly meetings is, just coming. So I encourage all of you to make sure that you listen to the podcast that we are going to be discussing, and not just be takers but givers. I want to hear from you as well. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the last 45 minutes of our time together, and I appreciate all of you getting on here. And it's good to also be able to have a relationship with each other. So we had right now there's like 15 people. I think there was more earlier, but really this is all about getting to know each other too, and collaborating and coming together as a group. So I really appreciate all your time. I appreciate all your perspective, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.